Hi everyone, and welcome to or welcome back to Stitches Past 5. My name is Vera, and on this channel I like to talk about anything that's going on in my knitting life, and that's exactly what I'm going to do today. So today I want to take a moment to do a product review of the Prym Interchangeable Knitting Needles. So they are, I have two that are still in the pack. They're essentially these knitting needles that come with an interchangeable like screw-on cable like mechanism, which essentially means that you should be able to minimize the amount of needles that you use and the amount of cables that you have, because we all know that somewhere we have a big box of so many like different lengths knitting needles. That's just a big mess because all the cables get intertwined and you can't really roll them and you can't really store them properly. And so Prym has gone ahead and kind of taken that and made this innovation, or I don't know if Prym came up with innovation or who did, but essentially they took this and created these knitting needles that essentially look like this. And then they are screwed on and off, often with the help of a little metal stick here, like this, and ta-da, then they can come off. So today I am going to share just some of the general specs of these needles, as well as some of the pros and cons. I have used them a bunch. I have continued to buy the sizes and stuff that I need, which is why these ones are here. And so I think I have a pretty good understanding of like what's good with them and maybe also what's not good with them, and then hopefully you have a good idea of whether these needles are something for you or something that you want to look into in your future knitting. Okay, so let's get to the general specs of these needles. You have two options of how to purchase them. Essentially, you can either buy a whole set, which you can get on Amazon or off of many knitting websites or supply websites out there. And those sets usually contain needle sizes from 4mm to 10mm, go up in half increments, and they include 4 like rope lengths, I guess this part, the cable part of the needle, at the lengths 60, 80, 100, and 120 centimeters. So you can either buy it as a set, which comes at around about 69, 70 euros. I've seen it as low as like 64 euros, kind of depending on probably your location, shipping costs, Amazon, etc, etc. Euros, USD, by the way, are usually pretty similar in their currency conversion. Then the other option is to do what I do, is buy them separately. If you choose to do that, then you can essentially buy the needles like as just needles, and I'll show you what's in here. This literally contains just 2 needles, right? These are the short one, and I'll get into this in a second, but you can just know that you can also buy them separately. So yeah, here. So when bought separately, these needles, I don't think it matters if it's the longer ones like I have them here or these short ones like here. They're all around the same price of 7.90 euros. In my local knitting shop it was a little bit more expensive, but online they're around 7.90 for the needles. And then if you want to buy just the cable, it's not in here right now, but this is the pouch that it comes in. The cable will be around about 4.90 euros, and yeah, again, my local knitting shop a little bit more expensive because they have to sustain themselves, obviously. But that comes in a little pouch like this, or sometimes it also comes in like I have the needle pouch as well, or the paper packaging. I guess it's just kind of like they probably switched to paper at some point, and shops are still trying to sell these, which I think is totally valid. So one thing to note is the sets that I've seen online, they usually provide the regular knitting needle, so that's this length right here, versus the small ones. So these are the shorter ones and these are the longer ones. The reason they're being 2 different lengths is because the shorter ones here, those will be used for the 40 centimeter round needle, round cable. So that's actually the one that I bought right here. And these longer ones, these are the ones that are used for any longer cable starting from 60 centimeters. I'm not gonna put this as a con of these knitting needles because that's something like every knitting needle manufacturer is gonna have if they were to produce interchangeable needles, just because of the physics that like to knit you need to like take it apart, and then you can already see that the distance from here to here is quite long, and with a 40 centimeter cable that doesn't work. Like you don't have space to knit, so it's more of a physics problem or situation or reason that we need these two different lengths of needle. So just when you're buying these, make sure that if you're buying the 40 centimeter cable or if you need that for your project, you cannot use the long ones. You have to use the short needles. So you have to purchase a separate pair of needles for those. That's the reason I have so many short ones, because I didn't have those and I need to make sleeves for a sweater. So that's why I went on and bought the short ones, because I already have a bunch of the long ones. Okay, so the cable, as like I said, it comes in this pouch. And with that also come these stoppers, which essentially are these two plastic caps that can then be screwed on. So once you take your needle off, say you have a lot of like stitches on here, you can take your needle off like this and screw on your cap, oops, just like this, ta-da. And that way, like if you do that on both sides, like cap here, your stitches are secured. So I think that's a really cool thing. It comes with all of the cables that you can buy for this. It'll always come with a set of caps, as well as with this metal rod right here, and this one is essentially used to tighten the needle. So there's a tiny little hole, I hope you can see it here, that the rod kind of sticks into, and that way you just have better grip. You kind of hold on to this, and that way you have better grip to screw off the needle right here. I will say that this rod is necessary, like both for tightening and for screwing them off, because obviously if you tighten it with this, you'll probably need it to screw it off just because it is metal down here, so it's a little like it's less grippy. But it comes with every set of cables, or with every cable that you purchase anyways, so that's kind of nice. Otherwise, they work like regular cable needles. They work like regular round needles, not too much to say about that. And yeah, so like I said, these come in separate lengths as well. I kind of stand by the philosophies like I'll only buy what I need, so I held off of getting this set because I do have like all the other needles as well, but I needed some new ones, some different lengths, so I thought why not switch to these Prym interchangeables. Yeah, so now I have these, but I don't have the full set. I just kind of have the ones that I have needed. But to be honest, I've also gone back to the shop to buy more because I just really enjoy working with these. So with that being said, let's get to the pros or the benefits of these needles that I want to share. I'll share those first, then I'll share my cons, and then I'll kind of answer the questions like, is it worth it? Is it worth the price? Is it worth the purchase, kind of? Okay, so the first pro, the first advantage with these is that they're so lovely. Like, they are gorgeous. Like, look at these needles. They're amazing. You can already like see just the wood finishing off of them. They're super, super smooth to knit. I have not had an issue with any fiber knitting with them. I've used them for acrylic, I've used them for cotton, I've used them for wool, I've used them for various different blends, and I've loved them for all. And I think that's a pretty big statement if you're kind of familiar with different materials of crochet hooks, knitting needles, etc. You'll notice that different materials behave very differently with different yarn makes or yarn compositions. And I have to say that these really have not disappointed with any yarn like compositions or with any yarn blends of any sorts. I think they're super smooth. I think they're lovely, lovely to work with. So that's my first pro, that there's no yarn specificity or no yarn preference with them, at least. I think with that comes just the high finishing and the high quality. So I think obviously you're looking at a price point that is not necessarily like a budget or the most budget friendly needle, right? We're looking at €8 for this, like it's 2 wooden sticks. I think €8 is not the cheapest, but I think for what you pay, you get exactly what you want. And although that should be a given, like I am so picky with like, I don't know, with just like substances and feeling things and how like tactile, knitting such a tactile activity, such a tactile hobby. So it's very important to me that like my knitting needles are smooth and feel good quality. And I would definitely say that that is the case with these. Yeah, I mean, I showed them just now, but they're just so beautiful and just very, very good quality. You know, like when you touch something and it's just good quality, that's what I also really enjoy about them. Nothing has really gotten caught for me, so I have kind of, when I first got them, I had the fear that because you screw it on, so here, there'll be like a little gap, right? Like even if I'm screwing it on here, there's obviously like a little, like this gap. And when I run my nail over it, like I do feel the gap. So I was a bit worried that like maybe yarn will get caught on this, or maybe like strands of yarn will get caught on this, but that doesn't happen at all. Like I make sure it's nice and tight with the stick, and I have not once had an issue where I've kind of had to go back and like get my stitches over this part because it's not smooth enough. So I think that kind of goes with the whole quality and knitting experience, smoothness feel, that that's not an issue. At least hasn't been for me, and I've used this for various different like girths or thicknesses of yarn. So just a side note, if that's something that you're also kind of thinking about in the decision of purchasing these. Another really nice benefit I love is these, like the blockers. I mean, the knitting needles I owned before these were kind of like the old metal ones that my grandma gifted to me, that I kind of inherited from her, and they would literally have needles that had like this at the end and a cable and then a needle as a separate thing. So I think it's really cool that we get this now with just like the addition of like 1 or 2 tiny little stoppers. So I think it's just like a nice thing that they thought about, that they put in there, that like back in the day used to be like a whole separate needle. So that's kind of also a nice benefit in my opinion. Yeah, and then I think the last thing that I really enjoy about these, just the overall ease. So like I'm looking at my box of metal long round knitting needles, and it's just a big mess because like I've tried so many things to organize them, but it's just so difficult. And I think with these, like I have my few cables and I have my, I don't know, maybe in total 10, 12 pairs of needles. And like, they're all just like in one place and nothing is getting tangled and everything is in order. Of course, that's the whole point of the interchangeability of them, right? That it's more in order. But I just really enjoy that, and gives me peace of mind. And it's also nice, like when traveling, I put my knitting in a pouch, and that I don't have 100,000 different like cable lengths in there. Where maybe if I'm gonna work on ribbing and then the body of a sweater, for example, that usually involves a change of needle size. And I can solve that by just taking this with my 2 needles, and to change my needle size, I'll just take these along. And I think that's a lot more manageable than like 2 long cables that just by default take up more space. This might sound like a very like small benefit, but for me it's really like, it's just so nice to have that, because I like traveling light and having things in place, and I just like that. So that's a pretty nice thing for me. Maybe not like Prym Interchangeable specific, but just in general, something that makes me happy. Okay, now for the cons, and at first glance my cons list might sound a bit long because I have found a few things that I've just kind of like struggled with these needles, but bear with me. The first one is that unfortunately I had one needle break on me. So this is the broken off bit, and it broke off here. And it was my own fault. I had them on the couch and then I kind of leaned on them, and these are like pretty thin. These are the long ones and the 3mm ones, so like it's pretty thin needle for how long they are. And they broke, and then I tried to glue it, but obviously with the glue, like, you just don't get the same edge. Like, I even tried to smoothen it out, but the glue came off again. So I was like, you know what, I need to buy new ones. Like, there is no way of salvaging this. Obviously that can happen with any wooden needle. I've heard other people have them break as well. I think it's all a matter of like taking care of your things. I no longer leave my knitting on the couch now because I have learned my lesson. But yeah, I don't know, just something that can happen. And it'll probably happen again with wooden needles. It'll probably might have happened to you already, maybe will happen to you in the future. But obviously this wood is not made out of steel, so it's bound to break. Like, it can break, especially the thinner ones. So I guess that's a con. I've had to buy a whole new pair because I couldn't figure out, like, at first I was like, oh, maybe I can just buy one. Maybe they have replacement needles, but I couldn't find that. So I just went back and bought a new pair. It wasn't the end of the world. It was really fine, but just something to keep in mind. Then, funnily enough, the replacement pair of those I got. So funnily enough, the replacement pair I got, and this is maybe one of the bigger cons I have with this needle, with these needles, is that, I mean, now I have 3mm needles, and I'm gonna try to show it to you, but I don't know if you can see it. Basically, the light colored needle has such like a flat tip where the others are pretty pointy. And it's a really, really small, you can maybe kind of see it, I'm not sure. And it's a really small detail that I'm just a little bit like disappointed with. Yeah, so essentially it's about the rounding of the needle at the top, or I guess the pointiness of it. So obviously the smaller the needle, the more like important how sharp it is or how pointy it is at the front. And I find that one of the ones, and this is only one, all the other ones are completely fine, but one of my needles is like just flat at the top compared to the other ones. And although I haven't had an issue knitting with this needle, I have knit like quite a bit with this one, it's just something that kind of bothers me when I'm knitting. So like, it has a flat top, so I feel like, I don't know, I have to be more conscious of my stitches. I have to be just a little bit more careful. And now the Prym needles are usually like kind of praised for how pointy their tips are, but I just picked one maybe that just isn't as pointy as the other ones. So there is a con for me. Maybe this is a once in a Prym lifetime thing that happens, but I did have to share it here because it is something that kind of is bothering me a little bit about my 3mm needles. I guess for me it kind of works out because I have 3 of them anyway, so I'm just not going to use the one that's flat tipped. But before that happened, it did kind of bother me a little bit, so yeah. One thing I just talked about is this like break here. So this, where you screw on the needle, the little gap, right? And here you can see it. And I did do some research and I read some reviews online, and other people have this too, that sometimes, and I've also experienced this, the backing, so the cable can start unscrewing a little bit while you're knitting. This is obviously really annoying because I've literally had it where I didn't notice it was unscrewing, and then all of a sudden I just have like this in my hand without the cable. Like, the cable was somewhere and my stitches were God knows where. So that was a little bit frustrating. What I've done since, I've just really like used the middle rod to really tighten it. And I haven't really had that many issues since, but obviously it's a screw like mechanism and screws can also get unscrewed. But yeah, usually like now I kind of notice it because the stitches do start to kind of get stuck there when it's coming undone, and then just kind of screw it together again pretty quickly. But it is something that like I'm always like a tiny little bit fearful of. I was like, what if it's gonna come undone? Again, something that can probably be prevented by just screwing it on properly. But because I've also had like one break, I'm a bit worried that if I like grip the wood and then screw from here, that I might like break it. It hasn't happened, nor have I ever felt any movement, but I'm just like a little bit more careful with them now after I've had one of them break for me. Another con that I found, and I was actually, to be honest, expecting it from these needles, is that they're not twisting. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm gonna grab another pair of wooden needles that I have that are twisting. Okay, so I have these needles here, and this is such a like small difference, but essentially I can twist my needles. I'm twisting my needle here, but the way the cable is attached, these are not interchangeable. The way the cable is attached to the metal, is attached to the wood, allows, I don't know if you can like really see it, but it allows the wood to twist without like the cable to twist. So I can come here and twist these and still like, maybe this is a good way, like I'm twisting the needles, but my knitting is not moving, right? So these are twisting needles, and these were also like pretty expensive. They're also bamboo of a different company. I think I bought these in Canada like forever ago. So I was kind of expecting like Prym have a pretty good reputation. Like they're pretty like high, I would say, price point, that they would be twisting, but they're not. Like if I hold here and I twist, like you can see that nothing is really twisting other than the screw if I'm not attached like tight enough. I don't know, maybe something that mechanism wise was not installable because of the screw top, but I feel like it could have been. I don't know, just something that I was kind of like hoping for. It's a very like small detail, and if you're not bothered by it, or if you're not used to it from other needles, probably like won't really notice a difference. But just because I do own these needles that are so wonderful because they're twisting, I wish they twisted the Prym ones. But I guess that's just, you can't have everything. So yeah, just know that the Prym Interchangeable Needles are non-twisting at the back. Okay, the last con, and I mean, I use this with caution, this con, is that they are expensive, these needles. Like, I've talked now all about how the quality is really high and really good, and like, I would 100% like recommend them for their quality. I would still say that the price point is relatively high. Now, of course, you can argue that they're wood and they're interchangeable and they have all these features. Yes, and that's true. And like, I think the quality matches the price, but I also have to acknowledge that if you're someone who doesn't want to spend a lot of money on knitting needles, or if you knit a sweater and already is spending like probably 100 euros or, you know, close to that on wool, that you might not want to go and spend another like 50 euros on knitting needles. I totally get it. So I think it's just something to be acknowledged that yes, they're expensive and maybe that's not possible for everyone. But I will say that if it is possible, like I would overall say that these needles are 100% worth it. I think that's the whole conclusion of this video. I have a really I've had a really good experience with them. I keep going to the shop to get more, even though I don't really like necessarily even need them at the moment. And I think that's always a really good sign. Even though they are expensive, I am willing to make that investment. From my experience, I've owned them for a while now, and the quality does not change with the more you knit, or maybe the wood gets worn out. Not at all. I think these are like one of those things that you invest in once and then you hopefully have them for a long term until they break with a little side asterisk. But if they don't break, I think you're gonna have these for a really, really long time, and I think you're gonna get a lot of enjoyment out of them, because it's just, I think knitting needles, you don't notice if they're good, but if they're poor quality, or if they, you know, don't behave the way you want them to, that's when you start noticing them. So I think I always say that by not noticing a knitting needle, like that's a good thing. That's how you want it. And with these, like, it's almost the opposite. Like, I notice how nice they are because I know what old or what, you know, previous generations of knitting needles can feel like. Like, you know, those really long ones that you kind of like have an arm workout. Like, that's what I'm talking about. So I think it's really cool that we have this available now, and that they're, yes, maybe a bit of an investment, probably still an affordable one if you take all things considered, but I definitely think it's one that's worth making. Maybe if you really love knitting and are just getting into it, I would really recommend that you just splurge a little bit, get these needles, because I don't think you will regret it. But yeah, hopefully my few insights, my few pros and cons have maybe given you a little bit of an idea of if these needles are right for you. Let me know if you enjoyed this video down below. Maybe let me know if you have these, if you like them, and if you don't, maybe what are your favorite knitting needle brands? I'd love to hear them down below. So yeah, take care. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, I'd love for you to subscribe and stick around, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.